welcome to today's Battle Mech review. Today we're going to look at an extremely popular one with the Timberwolf. I was going through the original clan mechs from the invasion, and I took a break and never went back to it. So now I just got someone asking me, hey, what do you have in regards to the Timberwolf? It's an odd mech because it is very well known and it's extremely popular, even though it hasn't really been in production around here for quite some time. It's one of those things that there were so many of them around that, well, we know what it is, and we remember how to build spare parts for it, and that's how we keep all of them running around. So let's look at it and have a better look. The Timberwolf, also known as the Mad Cat every once in a while, is one of the most iconic battle mech in modern history. Model kits for these, just like the Marauder and Shadowhawk and every once in a while the Atlas, are probably some of the most commons you will see in various big box stores. And if you go to specialty stores, you'll find things that are quite surprising. Some very detailed models, very advanced models, some mechanized models. It gets quite fun. The Timberwolf is basically the representative of the clan mech, just like the Atlas is sometimes seen as the representative of the Inner Sphere mech in a general sense. The Timberwolf also has the notorious honor of being one of the first, and some say the first mech, to ever have been seen from the returning SLDF to the Inner Sphere. Targeting computers didn't quite know what they were messing with when they saw a Timberwolf originally, and it kept switching from Marauder to Catapult without really knowing what was up. Of course, that's what the urban legend really says. If you start digging into it, you will notice and remember that a targeting computer is normally pretty terrible because they don't know what they're targeting at half the time. And when they pop up with a mech, it'll generally say, well, what design it is and what is in the inventory. When dealing with a Marauder, it would come up with MAD, so that portion is right. But if it was to deal with a Catapult, well, the Catapult production code is CPTL and not CAT. So it's switching from MAD to CAT makes very little sense in the grand scheme of things. I do have experience on old targeting computers and having them do wonky little things. It could have very well been a odd targeting computer in an early Wolfhound, but I mean, in the end, who knows really what happened at those points, because the Comstar keeps most of those recordings secrets. The Timberwolf is a second-generation Omni-Mech, which was built starting 2945 by Clan Wolf. It was basically an evolution from their previous Omni-Mech design, the first-generation Woodsman. It really shares a lot of design specs with that Woodsman. It is in the same weight class at 75 ton, it's got the same pod space. It's got the same technical top speed, even though the Woodsman used a mask in order to get its higher speed. But really, the Timberwolf used more advanced construction materials in order to make it quite a bit more reliable and more powerful. Unlike the Woodsman, which was openly traded by the Wolves to the other clans in order to get a little bit more money and a little bit more resources in, Clan Wolf really kept the Timberwolf as close to their chests as possible. In around 100 years, though, there were quite a few Timberwolf that had fallen into the hands of the other clans, and it was one of the more common mechs during Operation Revival. The Wolves had the bulk of them, but they were still commonly seen in the Clan Jade Falcon, who basically acquired quite a few through Isorla, Clan Smoke Jaguar, and Clan Ghost Bear, also stealing them or acquiring them through fancy trades and fancy reorganization. They also became the top prize for a lot of Inner Sphere commanders, so as soon as one was on the field, someone was trying to capture it. The biggest issue with the Timberwolf at the time was really a single factory building the darn thing, so whatever demand there was for it far outstripped the production, usually more than the Wolves would have wanted. Clan Wolf was ejected from the homeworld through the Wars of Reaving, so they lost access to that facility building the Timberwolf. There was a facility that was built on Wine Garden named W7, which built a limited quantity of them by hand machining most of the parts and most of the equipment, basically giving you a factory that was building mechs at about at the speed of a regular Succession War era factory. There were all sorts of facilities all over the Inner Sphere, though, building specialized parts for the Timberwolf because, well, everybody had some and everybody wanted to have parts for them. The factory was abandoned by Clan Wolf, and the Clan Else did take it back in 3138 as the Wolves moved away from their original territory to create the new Wolf Empire. And nowadays, the Timberwolf is still in production, thanks to the people at Kalon on Thermopolis. And this is one of the very lucrative contracts that was given by Clan Alaric Ward to various Inner Sphere corporations. The Timberwolf is one of the most advanced piece of hardware that was available in 2945. If you brought that thing into the Inner Sphere, people would just not understand how it worked anymore. And even amongst the clan, this was basically as advanced as it could get. The skeleton is made of endo steel. You've got 12 tons of thick ferrofibrous plates on the machine, giving you an ample protection for a mech its size and enough to stay in decently long engagements. Your engine is a 375 XL, which is really big, but it gives you a top speed of 86 kilometers per hour, which most people would say is absolutely crazy for a 75-ton mech, especially in the Inner Sphere. The original design, the Woodsman, which this was based on, also had a top speed of 86 kilometers per hour, but that one used a mask instead of a larger engine. You get 15 built-in double heat sinks in the engine directly, giving you massive heat dissipation. And you get 27.5, about a third of your weight, tons of pod space. It might not sound like a whole lot, but you can still do quite a bit with that. And with all the other modules already in there, it gives you a good enough flexibility. Your primary configuration of the Timberwolf is basically a replacement for your standard Marauders with a little bit more varied firepower options. You get a great targeting computer in there as well, giving you very good mid-range targeting options, which means you can engage people in a range that is, long range for most Inner Sphere warriors and a decent enough range for most clanners. Each of your arm mount an ER large laser and an ER medium laser, giving you about similar power and range to a regular Mad 1R. Each shoulder now has a 20 rack of LRMs with only a single ton of ammo feeding each of them. You won't be able to just bombard people with it, but you can use it while closing in, dealing a decent amount of damage. You get a bonus medium pulse laser for some precision firing at a bit of a closer range, and against infantry you get a pair of machine guns with a full ton of reload in order to be able to deal a whole lot of damage. It's quite decent. It does everything decently well enough. It's going to replace a whole lot of mechs in that mid-range 75-ton category. Honestly, there's a reason why this thing is often seen as a standard. If you really want to go infantry hunting, Foxtrot configuration is in the same family as the one above. This one still has the ER large, ER medium laser battery in the arms, and the shoulder now has a regular ER medium laser instead of a medium pulse in order to give you that mid-range punch. Each shoulder still has that big box of 20 LRMs fed by a ton of reload, but against infantry you get 3 AP Gauss one in each torso fed by a ton of reload. You'll be able to melt away infantry fairly quickly with that, and you'll be able to take out light armor also fairly well. Those things have a similar range to something like a medium laser. It is entirely efficient. Another all-arounder is Delta configuration, which is a little bit more specialized, however. Each arm is able to head cap now with a nice big ERPPC, giving you very nice long-range punch. Each shark torso now mounts a pair of Streak 6-tube SRM, fed by a single ton of ammo, and most of the time it's mounted forward-backwards, so you get 12 tubes of SRM pointing backwards and 12 tubes of SRMs pointing forward. I've seen quite a few warrior flip it over and have all the missiles forward, but I've even seen one with all the missiles pointing backwards for some odd reason. You get a nose-mounted small laser as well, just to give you a tiny little bit of punch to round up the design and use that aft ton. Still in the same family is Echo configuration, this one mounting an ATM-9 on each shoulder, with 6 tons of reload shared between the two, about 2 tons for each of the ATM types. Each arm mounts an ER large laser for direct firing and sniping, and you are able to remain a threat when your ammo runs out. You get a light tag in order to call in artillery strikes if necessary. Not the best thing ever, but it is a solution if necessary. And you get an ER small laser sometimes. I mean, you'll have people swapping one for the other every once in a while. It really depends on if you've got anybody in the back with RO4 missiles. A little bit more straightforward is Hotel configuration, which uses 18 double heat sinks to try to keep a pair of heavy large lasers decently cool. It's not going to work because heavy large lasers, or improved heavy large lasers in some cases, just don't run cool. That's just not what they do. For backup, you get a pair of 20 rack LRMs on the shoulder, now fed with 2 tons of ammo each, so you are able to engage at longer range for longer periods of time. And I've seen some people, though, take off a ton of ammo and replace it with an Artemis guidance instead. It really depends on the pilot. You still have an ER small laser in the nose, just in case your arms are blown off and you just run out of missiles. I mean, at that point, you better just retreat. Uniform configuration is the nifty underwater combat situation. This one mounts an RGL system in each of the torso to prevent the all breaches, which is pretty expensive but very useful as it'll keep your Timberwolf running. You get 4 UMU to be able to move underwater at about 43 kilometers per hour. You're slower than if you were running, but it's not, entirely terrible. For combat, you got 2 15 rack of long-range torpedoes on the shoulder, each fed by a ton of ammo, and your arms have an ER large laser and an ER micro laser for good measure. It's very decent, once again, but unlike some of the uniform configurations out there, this one you can't just switch to ground configuration by switching the UMUs for jump jet. This one is really more specialized. Tango configuration is a more recent one, which goes down the same road with big boxes of LRMs on the shoulder, now that they are backed by an Artemis 5 guidance system instead. This one is really a bombardment boat. You get 6 tons of reload, 40 LRMs with that Artemis 5, meaning that it's going to be super accurate at longer range. While at closer range, unfortunately, it cuts down a little bit. What you have is an ER medium laser in each arm and an improved heavy medium laser. You're going to have decent mid-range direct firing weapons. And for even closer range, you get 2 ER small laser and an ER small pulse laser, which is a weapon that I'm not always a huge fan of. It uses a bunch of experimental stuff that the Hellshorse have been using recently. I'm not 100% sure I am sold on that design. The Wolf's Dragoon also had a decent number of Mad Cat in their inventory, and they had their own configuration for it, which is Whiskey configuration. The main gun is an Ultra 20 class, which is pretty darn big, and you get 4 tons of reload. That's mounted in one arm, while the other one has a pair of ER medium lasers, or as I sometimes call them, almost large lasers. Your shoulders still have boxes of missiles, but this time it's streaked 6 tubes of SRM fed by a single ton of reload, which should be enough since those will only shoot when you get a perfect target lock. Rounding things up, you get an ER small laser in the nose and a supercharger, giving you a top speed of 106 kilometers per hour. It is, once again, entirely functional. It's going to be able to engage at a variety of range, generally at mid-range, and deal massive amounts of damage. It is quite the standard Wolf's Dragoon style setup. I would like to call Alpha configuration a bit of a kitchen sink weapon system design. You get a pair of ERPPC, 1 in each arm, which is a good start. To back this up, you get 3 medium pulse laser in the torso for accurate shorter range fire with an ER small laser because you've got that half ton. Finally, you get a single Streak 6 tube SRM to exploit old blow-up armor and do all sorts of funny things. I'm not sure, maybe you could have gone with some small pulse lasers on there to kill infantry to be even more kitchen sinky. It's still very nice, and it's going to do a good job at what it does. My configuration kind of goes the same way, copying the ERPPC in each arm. Now the side torso, though, mount a pair of small 5-rack LRMs in each side, which is a little bit weird because you could probably mount a 10-rack, but that's what they went with 2 tons of reload, where you probably would want to stick some smokes in or some mine-laying missiles. Against infantry, you get a big heavy flamer with 1 ton of shooting foam plasma napalm, whatever you're using there, and your shoulder has a large pulse laser for good measure. I don't think it's entirely terrible. I just find the missile setup on this one to be a little bit confusing. Maybe I would have gone with something a little bit different. Maybe SRMs here to use some Infernos just to follow up on that heavy flamer. If you want to take the whole kitchen sink, though, you probably would want to go with Bravo configuration. At long range, you get a Gauss rifle and a 10-rack of LRMs with barely enough ammo to actually make a difference. At closer range, you get a large pulse laser, which is definitely a very good weapon, and to kill infantry, you got a small pulse laser, which is, once again, a pretty decent weapon. To finish this off, you get a 4-tube of SRM in the side torso where there's the Gauss rifle in the arm, just to give you some backup weapon, I guess. All your missile launchers are tied to Artemis 4 guidance, which is pretty much a waste on a 4-tube of SRM, in my opinion. But still, it uses the appropriate weight, and it is decently accurate. It does a little bit of everything. Literally, that's what this design does. To get something actually dedicated, you have to go with Charlie configuration, which is meant to be a long-range fire support unit. This is something that we can discuss seriously because it does that fairly well. You get a pair of ER large laser, giving you accurate long-range punch, while you have an Ultra AC5 to give you some ballistic support and can be helpful against those guys with that nifty reflective armor. For indirect fire, each of your shoulder mount a 15 rack of LRMs with a ton of reload. You have that medium pulse laser in the nose for extra defense and an anti-missile system to protect you from enemy counter batteries. It does everything fairly well, just it's a little bit odd for a Timberwolf to be a little bit more dedicated. Sierra configuration is another more dedicated one meant for city fighting. This one mounts 5 jump jets to allow you to go 150 meters in the air, and this is going to be fairly good to op across buildings, go across canyons, go across large rivers, all sorts of fun things. Urban environment will mean infantry, so you do get 2 machine guns to protect you and fight various protesters if required. Your main gun is a large pulse laser in one arm and a pair of medium pulse lasers in the other, meaning you're going to be fairly accurate, which might limit collateral damage. Finally, you get 24 tubes of SRM, 12 on each side, allowing you to do all sorts of fun war crimes here using Inferno, tandem rounds, chemical rounds, all sorts of fun rounds, which your enemies will probably not enjoy. I think November configuration is probably more ancient than what some people think, because I've seen some battle ROM and gun cam that shows that it was probably the original primary configuration. Each arm carries an ERPPC very reminiscent of your old Marauder, while the side torsos have those 15 rack of LRM fed by a ton of ammo each. Against infantry, you get 4 machine guns and 2 medium pulse lasers give you extra mid-range punch. Very close to that Marauder setup that we were talking about earlier, with extra missiles and machine guns for extra damage. I'm not 100% sure if this one was not originally scheduled to be your prime and the other one just took the crown. The original Clan Diamond Shark, well, Sea Fox nowadays, wanted to make a quick buck on the Timberwolf, but they didn't have their IP rights for it. What they decided to do, though, was build the Mad Cat Mark II, which means that it was clearly slated to be sold to the Inner Sphere. It is not the Timberwolf Mark II or anything like that. It really shows what it's meant to be. As a standard battle mech at 90 tons, the Mark II borrows the look of the original, and that's about it. To be honest, it's more of a Gauss boat with some missile support. It's quite decent at what it does, but the fact that it's not an Omni-Mech makes it I will say a decent chunk inferior to the regular Timberwolf, at least in my opinion. So the Diamond Sharks did make a decent chunk of change with that Mark II, so they decided to go down the line and make a Mark III, this time at 55 ton. This one was a whole lot less popular though, and about the only people who bought it was the Clan Novacat and the Wolves in Exile, which are basically the people who didn't really have a choice but to buy mechs from Clan Sea Fox because, well, they didn't have anybody else. The actual Wolves went full spheroid and actually sued the Diamond Shark / Sea Fox in order to try to restrict the sales of the device. It's still a standard battle mech, so it really puts it down quite a bit in the utility department, but it's not a terrible machine either. The latest attempt to build a Mad Cat was the 3136 Savage Wolf, which was once again built by Clan Sea Fox, but this one was bought in massive amount by Clan Wolf. This one features quite advanced technology with ferrolamellar plates, an endosteel chassis, an XXL engine, basically all sorts of things, which would make the mech the price of a normal formation of Omni-Mech for a single machine. It does share many of the design traits of the original Timberwolf, and it is becoming the standard machine of the Wolf Empire and the new SLDF. It's quite efficient, it has a decent amount of pod space, we'll have to do a full review on it, as it is, once again, an Omni-Mech. As you can see, it was often imitated, and even imitated in the inner sphere by the good old Rakshasa, but it was never really matched. Timberwolf is the thing that most people associate with the word battle mech nowadays. As an Omni-Mech, it's polyvalent, it's fast, it's agile, it's decently tough, it's got good heat sinking. It's not perfect, but it fits just about any role perfectly enough. Even with stoppage in production and limited part, it never went extinct because there was always an hunger for Timberwolves for everybody. And there's all sorts of people all around the inner sphere and probably clan space who builds parts for Timberwolves in a shed in order to make sure that the ones that they have keep running. So I thank you very much for listening to me for so long. I hope you guys have a very nice rest of your day, and I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.